Hi, my name's Associate Professor Hanabeth, and I'm at Murdoch University between sustainability as a sustainable agricultural specialist, and I'm also in the vet school. And I had a background in applied science and natural resource management, and came to the end of my studies and wondered why everybody was ignoring the science in so many different ways. So I'm really interested in looking at how we can build understanding of the barriers of really good land, animal and farm management. So that's what I'm going to be speaking with you about today. Going to give you a bit of an insight into my own research, why I do it, what we find, and how that can make a real difference for agricultural resilience across Australia. So let's jump in, and I'm now going to share my slides. And by the way, I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in the tutorial, so don't miss this one. Um, so I'm a part of the Soil CRC, which is a national research program. It's got about 8 universities, 20 farming system groups or grower groups, as we call them here in the West. And it's all about looking at soil health across Australia. So everything from how do we develop new widgets to make our soil more healthy? How do we develop new biological innovations? How do we also have social and economic improvements? And how do we know what's going on? How do we measure it better as well? So those are the key areas of the soil CRC. And I sit into that social program because I want to know what's driving farmer decision making. So I'm going to talk to you a bit through the project, and I'm also going to show you just a little bit of insight into the findings, and then there's plenty more for you to go and have a look at in your own time as well. So yeah, it's not rocket science that, what's the biggest impact on soil health? What's the biggest impact on animal health? Well, actually, it's what's up here in the head of the landholder or the livestock manager. So we know that landholder decisions are absolutely central to the health and productivity of land, soil, and of course, animals on the farms as well, which is why we're here. So what we've done is we have an established mail out methodology. It's old school. We post right now I've got 4,000 of these landing in Western Australia. So we send these out and we ask landholders a whole range of questions about their land management. It's an established methodology. We let them know we're sending a survey. We send them a survey. We remind them, and we send it out to a sort of a defined area that we run the surveys within, and we run a random sample. So that means it's called probability sampling. We can make bigger inferences about what's happening in that region from the survey. We're interested in the practices, priorities, challenges, and a whole range of factors around how farmers are managing their land, what they understand about different practices, etc. And it's spatially referenced. So that means we can cross-reference our data with that of what's happening in terms of soil health, rainfall, things like that as well. And it's had a really big impact in strategic planning from local to national scale. So I think it's a really exciting project to be involved about. So hopefully by the end of the day, you'll also be excited about surveys. We follow best practice methods, and I published a paper to say, yep, these are best practice methods. This is what we do, and a big part of this is engaging people from the beginning. When we want people to adopt or be a part of something that we're creating, we need them to be involved from the very beginning. So we bring in our partners. We say, what do you need to know about landholders in your region? And every region's got a different sort of sample. This is where it's going out in WA through the wheat belt and down through the southwest. And then we build that into the survey model. And we also build their priorities into the reporting. So there's a big process of co-design within this project. And there's a lot of people involved. This is about a quarter of them, maybe. There's probably more as well. We've sat around the table with these guys in 6 farming regions, actually 7 now. We're doing 2 regions within WA, and finding out what do you need to know about landholders in your region. And as you can see, they're different types of groups. So farming system groups are going to be more interested in, well, farming, and NRM organisations are going to be more interested in natural resource management and how people are managing their waterways and trees and things like that. So often we've got groups that do both. So the survey generally includes both things. So there we go. There's some pictures of us co-designing the survey across the country, and those are Those are our Eyre Peninsula people in the top left there in South Australia. We've got the Wimmera of Victoria in the middle. We've got Central West New South Wales on top right. Bottom left is North Central Victoria. Middle bottom is Tasmania, and the bottom right is the wheat belt of Western Australia. Um, So across these surveys, we have core questions that we ask of everybody. And also in each region, we move things around a bit and we make some areas bigger to reflect those priorities of our partners in those regions. So obviously the basics, who are farmers? How old are they? What are their challenges with their soils? How do they manage their property? How long have they had their property? Who's involved in decision making? And what are their plans for the future? And these are the different years that we've run the surveys, because we've run them once and we're now running them again 4 to 5 years later. So we can also understand how things might be changing across Australia. So I know you're keen to hear about the results. Let's get started. So we look at really basic things like what are the different types of landholders in a region. So the dark blue is the full-time farmers, and the light blue is the non-farming landholders. The part-time farmers are grey and hobby farmers are the green. So we can get a sense that this could be quite different across regions. And things like other basic demographics like age and gender can also be quite different. And we do find overwhelmingly that men are managing farms, but women tend to be more involved in managing hobby farms and whatnot. So there's a lot of basic demographic trends that we can look at. Specifically, we're interested in land challenges, and there's a whole range of different things here that are involved in that. And you can see we do zoom in on soil issues specifically because, well, it's the Soil Cooperative Research Centre. But we also look at things like concerns about climate change, but also things like concerns about changes in weather patterns, because some people might have resistance to the idea of climate change, but they can see that the weather patterns are changing. So little things like that to get a sense of what's happening with people, because words matter. Generally, you can see there's around across, you can get a sense of those national trends, but there's declining soil health and productivity comes up as a major issue, and it's particularly large in Central West New South Wales, but it's about 60% across all of the other regions. And then, so that's zooming in again. So of those that are really concerned about soil health, what are the key issues? So you can see there, acidity, low organic carbon, declining nutrient status, low biological activity and erosion. So those are very common issues across Australian farming systems. And our role as researchers and universities to find ways to address those challenges. And of course, there are many different ways that people are being recommended to address those sorts of challenges. And that's why we then look at the practices and what people are applying those practices, and when people are not applying them, why not? What are the challenges? What are the barriers in the way? And you can also see other things in here that like social issues, like the absence of important services and infrastructure, and things like social license, public opposition to agricultural activities, which can be really important in terms of animal management specifically. And as you can see, they are coming up. Absence of services actually comes up as one of the most important issues across rural Australia. So that's a really important message. And as the custodian of this large data set, that's one of the things that I say when I meet with federal agencies around how do we support farmers better? Well, let's look at the bigger picture. And that can come down to things as simple as the internet. So we ask farmers, what's the biggest challenge what are the things that they really want to see in terms of new technologies or innovations or knowledge? And they say, we want better internet. We want to be able to use our farm data more effectively. And we can invent all these exciting widgets, but if farmers don't have mobile connectivity, then that's going to be a major barrier. About half of farmers up until recently have said that that's a challenge for them. So it can be really substantial. So in terms of the land uses, you can see across Australia, there's some very clear trends there in land use. And so beef cattle, that's much bigger there in Central West New South Wales and also in Tasmania, particularly in the regions that we've surveyed, but also important in the Wimmera. And in the northern wheatbelt region that we looked at, it was just over 20% of people that had livestock at that point. And this is 2020 data for WA. You can also see the different practices that landholders are implementing and how many are testing their soils. Just these sorts of basics are really important. And so soil testing can vary hugely per state. You can see here that West Australian farmers in the Northern Wheat Belt, I mean, these guys have really, really big farms, are the best in the country at undertaking that soil testing, closely followed by North Central Victoria, though that data was actually around the whole period of management. So have they ever tested their soils? That's why those are all jump up a little bit. Compared to other regions, though, if you look at the northern wheat belt of WA and the Eyre Peninsula, you've got less than half of farmers who are testing their soils. So we're able, through our data, to start to get a sense of why that might be. So we look at all of the different things that we know affect why they might or might not test their soils, and we can get a sense of where the gaps are. For example, we found that although there's a major proportion of farmers, say 93%, think that soil testing is an essential first step in understanding soil condition before you try and do anything. There's only less than half of farmers are testing soils. And what it did correlate with, although farmers in this region are actually really good at whole farm planning, there's been big investment by NRM organisations in supporting that in the past. We've now identified that the gap for those NRM organisations and agricultural organisations is to support farmers and to know what to do with their soil testing data, to develop nutrient budgets that are going to be economically effective, but also environmentally sound as well. So they're getting that balance right. And if they don't know how to do that, why test the soils? So therefore we can see our rates of soil testing improve, but also our nutrient management as well as an important knock-on effect. And you can also see interesting things like trends in what people are doing in terms of precision farming, no-till farming, planting trees and shrubs, and it keeps doing that, and also regenerative agriculture. And that's another really interesting space that I've worked in quite a bit, understanding that there you can see there's less than 20% of people who say that they're doing practices they consider to be regenerative. You also will find that there may be 70% of farmers who are maintaining over 70% ground cover. You've got huge amounts of farmers here who are applying biological amendments, but they don't see themselves as regenerative farmers. So practices and the words don't necessarily, words like regenerative, for some reason, are putting some people off. So people are doing it anyway. So that's the main thing when we're looking at building landscape resilience. So this is as an academic in this space, we have to do the big level thinking. So this is a model that I've developed with my team, and we're looking at what are the drivers, what are the things that are driving landholder priorities that are then shaping on-farm outcomes. And we found that all these things are really important, and we build all of these things into the many pages of the survey. And we're interested in, well, what do their friends and neighbours think? Is that important to them? What institutions do they trust? Because believe you me, change moves at the speed of trust. And if they don't trust the organisation or the person, they're not going to listen and they're not going to respond to what they have to say. So as academics, that's why we need to be very careful to maintain that connectivity, or as vets, building that connection in community is so, so important for people coming to you for support and coming to ask questions, whether you're an institution or an individual. Confidence to act, is it worth doing? And that really closely links in with what other people are doing, and also your worldview. And when I talk about worldview here, the things that I found in the survey that are particularly important are whether people believe that climate change is anthropogenic. That means whether people believe that human activity is driving it. And there's a very close linkage there in belief in that decision making should also be driven by science and data. So there's a clear connectivity there. I've published papers around this, and we found that there's a really strong connection, interestingly, with people having completed year 12. So education's really important there, but it's not. The further you go, the stronger your belief. If you've completed your year 12, then you're more likely to have an understanding that climate change is, yes, due to human activities. But if you go into your degree, that doesn't make a difference, which does make sense, because once you go into your degrees, unless you're doing a science degree, it's unlikely that you're going to learn about the dynamics and the science of climate change. If you're doing engineering, you're unlikely to learn it. If you're doing arts, you're unlikely to learn it. Even in agriculture, how much do we learn it? Well, thanks to Pete, a fair bit. The pink are things that can be changed, and I've now run this past a number of grower groups and different stakeholders, and they look at this, they put their heads from side to side, and they go, "Yeah, yeah, actually, this makes sense to me," which for me as a researcher is good because it means I'm getting something right. So we get all of the responses to everything. So let's say we want to look at soil testing. When we get all of our data, we look at everything, every single question in our survey compared with everything else, and we try and look at what are the statistically significant linkages within this in relation to this particular best practice. And of course, this has to make sense as well. So there's a bit of human input into that as well. And then narrow that down to about 30 or 40 variables, and we put it into this regression modeling statistics. And it comes out with the 5 things that work together to drive and have the biggest influence on that practice. In this case, it's soil testing, and they have this R squared value. And they say if your R squared's over zero point 0.4, then you can write a check about it. Apparently, that's a good R squared. So soil testing, this was good. And this linked in with education. If people were soil testing, and this is for the air, sorry, particular to the Eyre Peninsula data, so those 50% farmers, they're more likely to have a whole farm plan in place. They have an understanding of holistic farm management. They have confidence in a range of best practices, and they have lost some land to production. So that makes sense because they also have issues they want to test and find out how they can mitigate and address those challenges. Couple more examples here. So in terms of whole farm planning, again, we've got a nice strong R squared there. So if people are whole farm planning, which was majority of farmers actually on the Eyre Peninsula, then they would have good. Oh, sorry, that's North Central Victoria. Forgive me. I've now gone into. We're in Victoria. We've skipped states. So if they're undertaking whole farm planning, they understand. They've got good resources to hand about business planning. They have a good knowledge, particularly about time controlled grazing. They are operating a larger area of land, and they have a succession plan in place. They are also more likely to plan over a longer time frame in terms of their strategic planning. So rather than 1 to 2 years, they'll be looking at 5 to 20 to 100 years if they've got a whole farm plan in place. In terms of grazing practices, so time controlled holistic grazing, they want to know that it's worth doing. They have a high confidence that it's worth the returns. They have a good knowledge of how to do it. They feel confident in that knowledge. They feel like they have a strong value of being a part of positive change in farming. They are overall decreasing their use of synthetics per hectare, it's synthetic inputs, and they have a succession plan in place. So of all these things that have come out as strong relationships in the survey, there's something that pops up in almost every model, and that is to have a succession plan in place. So if you're looking at, again, the drivers of resilient farming systems, the social comes in time and time again. If you have a successor, you're going to plan over a longer time frame. You're going to be thinking about how you're going to make your farm better for that next generation, and that is really important. We've found that there's a bit of a pipeline, and this pattern and this trend really does continue across farming systems. So while you will find that the majority of farmers intend to keep the farm in the family, which is good and a good aspiration, only 45% in this case in North Central Victoria have an interested family member who want to take on that farm in the future. 33% have a child working on that property right now, and only 18% have a succession plan in place. And of course, this is going to relate to the number of farmers who are older within that region. But with an average age of farmers well into their 60s, this is quite concerning in that region to see that only 18% of farmers have a well-developed succession plan in place, especially as that is such a big driver of healthy landscapes as well. So I talked about that technology that so this is how some of the this research can again inform policy directly. So we have open questions in the surveys as well. What's the kind of technology is going to support your land management decisions? So again, this is in South Australia. We want to know about longer term weather forecasting, improve mobile connectivity, and also things like technologies like spot spraying instruments and soil amendments, knowledge about biological amendments, but also holistic planning and benchmarking. So it's there's widgets in there, but it's also soil knowledge, which is really important. And that is certainly a national trend. We find that soil knowledge usually comes up in the top, it's either three or four, and it usually pops below mobile connectivity and weather. So this is the recommendations that have come out of our South Australian report that's been released very recently. And from this, you have we're saying, reducing the risk margins. So how do we reduce the risk? How do we, and that's diversification. I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So reducing the risk, improving resilience. And contingency planning for, because they had a really dry year when we asked this, when we ran this survey. And we particularly asked a question to farmers, what's the biggest influence on your profitability in the last 12 months? Well, their last 12 months had been awful. So that the answer to that question was actually very important, because those responses are telling us which farmers who were more resilient and what were the factors making them more resilient in that drought context. So they said adaptive program management helped us, planting lentils, rotating more responsively to rainfall forecast, tactical livestock stock decisions, and that was around their grazing practices, but also early destocking, variable rate fertilizer, and there are also other things in there which came out through the report that I mentioned before. So expanding soil testing and interpretation support, and also learning from each other, working together across generations, disaster preparedness, and an awareness and uptake of resilience building practices. I have an honours student who's recently finished called Jennifer Ringbauer, and she looked at, well, what are the key factors within this survey that are driving resilience? And she found, we used the Stockholm Resilience Principle. So Stockholm Resilience Centre, Sweden, has some very useful ideas around resilience, and we looked at the items within the survey that could help support and build knowledge around that. And there generally these are: one, diversify. In the context of farming, diversify. Enterprises, look at and bringing more biodiversity into your farm, and also get information from different places. Be part of a pool of knowledge, and not just to make sure that you're getting information from more than one place, one bloke, one neighbor. Also, in terms of the second thing is building connections. So again, that's building and supporting your knowledge networks, also your connection to land. The third is reducing inputs, and that's so enhancing your ecosystem health, and that's really important. Fourth was taking a holistic so having an understanding of how things work together, and that's actually quite an important part of ecology, the interactions between things on the farm. If I do this, if I am able to improve my soil organic matter, I will also improve my soil water holding capacity, which will mean that there will be more water sitting in my soil. Once things are drying out, the water will stay in there for longer. So understanding how those systems might work together and support each other. So ongoing monitoring and adaptation. So adapting according to what you're reading. So having a look regularly checking in with what's happening with your soil, your crops, your animals, your livestock, and monitoring your practices as a result. Also, intergenerational participation will be more likely to lead to successful succession outcomes, and that's really important. Organizations working together. So, there's so many great people working in so many places, but we do tend to end up in our silos. We all have our key performance indicators and the things that we have to do. You've all got your assessment deadlines. We've all got our various journals that we publish in as academics, and and different priorities that we are focused on that might mean that we end up moving in the same circles rather than connecting. So broadening the people that we collaborate with in terms of organizations who do things differently together is really, really important. And I try and embody that in my research and teaching that I do. And finally, farmer well-being. So how can a farm be resilient if the farmer is not resilient and well? So that's really important. And we found a whole range of different things within the survey, and these come up as really strong and statistically useful components of resilience on farms that we can now test using our survey methodology. And there's some of the attributes of well-being: being proud of leaving the farm in a better state for the next generation, feeling that they're coping with farm management, and feeling connected and supported by their local community. So to sum up this survey, we can't change everything. We just can't. But we can identify the things that we can change, and we can work with that as people working with farmers and as vets. And you will inevitably end up working with a whole range of different farmers and people in that agricultural space. But then there are things that we can't change, but we can understand better. So what are people's underlying values? Are they more motivated by environmental outcomes, economic outcomes, a big mix of both? Do they want to play an influencing role within their community? Where are they at? And if you can bring these things together, then you can inform strategic planning that is informed that you directly by what is important to landholders. And therefore, we can improve regional profitability and resilience. So in summary, this rural landholder social benchmarking method can provide some very useful insights into what is happening for farmers, their needs, aspirations, and the elements driving decision making around their farms. We know that goals and values are orienting factors. We know that issues that are challenging for farmers are really important, and then knowledge of and confidence in applying best practice are closely linked. How they access information, where they get it from, is really important. Also, their attitude and their learning mindset and who they work with on their farm is really important as well. Let's not forget time and money though, because they're going to be enablers, but they can be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy as well. People don't have money or time, so they're not able to try new things, so things don't change, and that's where they stay. And so that's a tricky one, isn't it? And if they have the capacity, then they'll try more things and make more money potentially. But look, all of these things, we bring them together, and it helps us to understand the underlying values and priorities of farmers across different farming systems, which is really important for supporting and guiding strategic planning from for local councils, local NRM organisations, up to federal bodies and authorities. From the research that I've been doing over the last 5 years, what I do find is a very strong trend across all of our best practice models, which are, and this is, if you just take away one thing at the end of this lecture, that if people are working together, their farms are stronger. They've got different people with different ideas, different knowledge, different skills that are able to make the farm stronger in various ways. Also, if they are thinking over a longer time frame, that's more likely to link in with best practice. And also, if they're thinking on their farm and of their farms as a whole, that is also a really important lever for supporting resilience in farming systems. And also another key thing is, we are all working in our various areas, and it's just really, really important to have that focus and be able to step out of your comfort zone and work together. And it has ongoing knock-on positive effects. So come out of your shell and, don't be afraid to learn from others. Oh yeah. Yeah, and here's all the stuff that we publish around this. So if you're interested in having a look at this work and you want to get an understanding of what's happening for farmers in your region, the Western Australia survey data will be popping out by hopefully early next year, and we'll have some really strong data there. We've got some information from the Northern Wheat Belt last year, and there's a whole range of different sort of publications that you can access there. So if you can't find them yourself, just let me know, and happy to send them through. But if you go to the Soil CRC website, you will find that there's a whole wealth of information. Ah, yes, and we're also creating a dashboard at the moment. That's there to jog my memory that we're developing a dashboard to help people access and be able to interact with the data that we're producing from the Rural Landholder study across Australia, which will be ready by next year, with Murdoch Uni as a key custodian. So I'd like to thank you so much for your time and remind you, if you're interested in going through this work, go to that Soil CRC website, soilcrc.com.au, and then look at the Surveying Farm Practices tab. And there's a lot of reports there, so you can look at the trends around a whole range of factors. So thanks for taking the time, and I look forward to meeting you all.